speak to you today. I started out this morning going to Macon, Georgia to speak to firefighters, and because of the fog in Macon, it delayed my schedule about 30 minutes, and I've been trying to catch up all day. But I appreciate your allowing me to be with you today. I will be fairly brief because I have another scheduled meeting that we're going to be making an announcement on some things that I think you will find to be of great interest, and we're going to do that very shortly after I leave here. But let me first of all back up a bit. Sometimes in my introduction to my resume, the fact that I practiced law for 23 years is sometimes overlooked. I was a prosecutor for a number of years, and in those days, it's a lot different than what Pat Head and his successor and others are confronted with now, where sometimes the prosecution of cases takes a very long period of time. My district attorney, and I was the only assistant district attorney in what was then a 4-county circuit in North Georgia. He was suffering from great physical difficulties, and as a result of that, he could strike juries, but he could not stand to try, physically stand and try a case. So, as a young prosecutor, I got the chance to try almost every case in 4 counties in the Superior Court over a little over a 2-year period. It was trial by fire, but it was one of the best learning experiences I have ever had. He would be down front in the courtroom striking the jury. I would be out in the anteroom talking to the witnesses who had never been interviewed prior to the process being started. Now, I know that would scare you all to death today. It would scare me to death today, too. I was too young and too inexperienced to know any different. But it was a great learning experience for me. So what I'm saying to you is I understand the practice of law. I think I do. When I got through with that experience, it was a great trial experience, and I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I went into the civil side of things, and I decided I'd done my share in the criminal arena, so I did not engage in the defense of criminal cases, except in those days, we did not have a public defender system. It was a rotating process whereby you were appointed on a rotating basis, and it was your job to, in effect, be the public defender for a given period of time. So, other than that, my experience was in the trial of civil cases. And I realize that today, as I look on this audience, the vast majority of you are in that category. You practice civil law, and you rarely, if ever, have occasion to be involved in the criminal system. So therefore, you might ask, well, what am I interested in criminal justice reform for? Well, I think you should be interested in it because I have come to understand over the years that if you are a lawyer and you are in the midst of non-lawyers, you are expected to know everything. Have you ever had that experience? And you cannot plead your way out of that by saying, oh, I specialize in this part of civil law. Well, you're a lawyer, aren't you? Don't you know the answer to this question? So today, if this is not informative for any other purpose, it will be good in social gatherings, and you meet your friends in church, in Sunday school, and in civic organizations. It might be helpful for you to have a conversant knowledge of what has happened in our state, which I believe is truly transformational. Let's back up. My first year in office, I was elected and took office in January 2011. Very shortly after doing so, I came to the conclusion that if we did not do something in our criminal justice arena, we were not going to see the kind of progress that our state needed. We were the 10th largest population state, but we had the 4th largest prison population. And the question was being asked, well, why is it so disproportionate? Personally, I didn't think we were that much meaner than everybody else, quite honestly. But there was something that was out of balance. So I asked some of you, I think, in this room probably helped serve on the Criminal Justice Reform Commission that was appointed. Thomas Worthy, who is now with the State Bar and is with us today, was our deputy counsel in the governor's office, and he took the leadership role of overseeing the Criminal Justice Reform Commission. Out of that commission came recommendations, which we took to the General Assembly the next year of 2012. And it was to start on the front end of our system. Why is it that we are incarcerating so many people in our prison system that by our own definitions are classified as non-violent? Well, the answer to that was there weren't that many other options. Now, your county and some other counties scattered around our state had the foresight to already establish accountability courts, and I thank you for that, and you have a long history in that regard. But many counties did not. So the council came together, they looked at the problem, and they recommended that if we wanted to change the dynamic in our criminal justice system, we should start by diverting nonviolent offenders out of our prison system. Very costly system, by the way. Average about $18,000 per bed per year for an adult offender in our prison system. Now, what has happened? It's in a relatively short period of time. This was passed in 2012. What we have seen is this. First, rather dramatic effect was we have seen a drop in the jail backlog in local jails. When I was running for governor 4 years ago, practically every sheriff in this state said, "Governor, when are you going to get those state prisoners out of my jail?"
Amen.
Y'all heard it too, right? Well, in fiscal year 2011, the state of Georgia was spending in excess of $25 million annually to pay local sheriffs to keep state prisoners because we didn't have the capacity to pick them up and do anything with them. At the end of fiscal year 14, which happened just a month or so ago, it was down to just slightly over $40,000. That's a savings of approximately $24 million on an annual basis. And that is money that has hopefully been used more appropriately as we have funded additional accountability courts across the state. In the first quarter of this year, I am told that there were 4,100 offenders who were engaged in some part of the 105 accountability courts that are spread across our state. Most of those 4,100 in the olden days would have probably wound up in our prison system. And I believe that the results are going to not only be financially rewarding, but more importantly, especially those of you who have any involvement with accountability courts, you can attest to this fact. It will be rewarding in that you change the direction, and as many of the graduates from drug courts and other courts will tell you, you saved my life. And that's the important part. We've changed the direction of people's lives. Now, are you going to always be successful? No, that's impossible. You should not ever expect that to happen. But are you going to be more successful in terms of decreasing a recidivism rate than simply incarcerating in a prison system? Absolutely. You've already demonstrated that. We have already seen that all across our state. And that number is continuing to show promise and show that the results are going to be exactly what we had hoped they would be. Now, by reducing that prison population, it has also had some interesting demographic effects. We have seen the African American prison population in the state of Georgia decrease by about 20%, the lowest total that it has been in a quarter of a century in Georgia. So something is working, and it's achieving not only the law enforcement perspective on it, but it's also achieving some social issues that needed to be dealt with. And for those of you who are involved in any of the accountability courts, and as you just heard enumerated, the variation is magnified now. Veterans courts being one of the more recent additions, more and more mental health courts are coming into play. If you're involved in any of those, please accept my personal thanks and appreciation for what you do. You, I know, are rewarded and gratified by seeing the positive effects of what you are a part of. That was the first year. The second year, we looked at what was probably even more difficult area, and that was juvenile justice. Here again, we were incarcerating so many people who were classified as nonviolent, and yet we were locking them up in RYDCs and YDCs. And the result was it was very costly. If you think $18,000 is expensive for a prison bed for an adult, try almost $90,000 for a juvenile for a year's period of time, because we have to do so many more things for them and it is so much more expensive. The model was this: create local diversionary programs in local communities and try to keep them out of our RYDCs and YDCs. We had to start somewhat small. We concentrated on a grant program for the counties that were sending us the largest number of juveniles into our state system. We have expanded that, and I hope that as we go into future years, we will continue to expand that so that every county and every community in our state will have the opportunity on the juvenile side of things to divert individuals away from incarceration as well. Now, the unique thing about those first 2 years, those separate bills in 2 separate years of the General Assembly, they passed unanimously. Now, there's rarely anything that has any substance to it that gets unanimous support in the General Assembly. So these reforms crossed partisan boundaries totally. And I am very, very appreciative for the members of the General Assembly who saw fit to embrace these reforms. And I think they have been rewarded by seeing the effects of it. Now, the third leg of the stool was the one that the General Assembly passed this year. Admittedly, it is somewhat more difficult and complex. And that is, what do you do with the almost 60,000 people who are incarcerated in our state prison system? The recidivism rate is currently about 1 out of every 3 that is released is back in our system within 3 years or less. And it is the proverbial revolving door. I asked the question, well, what can we do about that? And we came back with a survey of the makeup of our inmate population. And we found that almost 7 out of every 10 had no high school diploma and no GED and no marketable skills. Now, if you don't have that and you're released from prison and you have a major felony on your record, and we pat you on the back and say, go and sin no more. And that's what we've been doing. What do you think the chances of success are going to be? Well, we need to improve those chances. And we believe one of the ways to do that is to start on the front end, because that's people who have dropped out of our school system. They simply walked away from education. And if you walk away from education, you are on a path that more than likely is going to lead you into trouble in some form or another. So, we have hired one of the better school superintendents in the state of Georgia. Some of you might know him because he has lived and worked in close proximity as the school superintendent of Forsyth County. He has gone to work with the State Department of Corrections as an assistant commissioner charged with education and training. And we are going to raise that skill level within the inmate population. In fact, he told me a week or so ago that he has the first graduation taking place up at Arendelle Prison, the female prison up in Habersham County. And that is a beginning. It is a good beginning. When businesses started hearing that we were going to try to instill some skills in our inmate population, we had one major company that came to us and said, if you will train people to be good welders, we will guarantee them a job when they get, when they're either paroled or they serve out their full sentence. And we'll even help you pay for some of the cost of the equipment to train them. So I think it offers great promise. But here is where you do come in. When somebody is released from prison with a felony on their record, it is very difficult for them to find a place to live, because many times they have lost connections with their family, they've been disowned, or family has moved, or whatever. We need housing, and more we are seeing communities come together, either on the governmental side of things or the private side of things. More likely it's the private side. Churches, we have embraced churches and the faith-based community to be a part of this, and we are seeing people step up and say, we will help with transitional housing. And then we have to embrace the employer community and ask them if they will give consideration to giving someone who has a felony record a job. If they have a skill, a marketable skill, the likelihood of that being afforded to them is greatly, greatly enhanced. So, I will hearken back to a question that you've often heard, and I've heard it in the political arena for many, many years. It seems like it was during a debate when Lester Maddox was running for governor. And somebody was asking him a question about why is it that Georgia has such a bad record when it comes to your prison population? And his answer was very simple, but it is an answer we're trying to provide. He said, we just need a better class of prisoners. You know, we need to be turning out of our prisons a better class of inmates who have an opportunity and a skill that they can show a prospective employer. Now, we're trying to set the example at the state level. It's called manning the box. If you fill out an application for employment, you know you've got this long list of questions. You check the box, etc. If you check the box, have you ever been convicted of a felony? How many times do you think that application is going to get past a human resources person? Very unlikely. We have said the state is going to set the example. For those jobs in state government that do not require a high security background clearance, and that's most of the jobs we have, you will be given the opportunity for a face-to-face interview, and you will not have your application simply discarded because you checked that box. We're going to try to set the example. We think we will be able to show good success by doing that. And if we're able to do that, then I believe there will be more inducement for the private sector to follow the example that the state is going to set. So those are the three overviews of criminal justice reform. The first two passed unanimously. The third one did not get unanimous approval. I think there were 2 votes against it in the House, and both of them were Republicans, by the way. Neither one of them survived their May primary, by the way. So sometimes it does pay to be on the right side of history. I think the members who voted for it and those who will come in and follow up on the implementation of it at the General Assembly will be greatly pleased with the results that they're seeing. We are pleased with the results that we're seeing. But it takes constant vigilance. Like most things that are reform, you can't just abandon the process. You have to follow through. So, one of the other things that you can do, in addition to adding verbal support and maybe even personal support for the inmates who are returning to your community. And by the way, the pattern is they come back to the county where they got in trouble and were sent to prison in the first place. So, however many have been sent off, when they get out, the likelihood is they're going to come back to your community. So we have a personal interest, I think, to be able to show that we can do something a little better to keep them from reoffending. We can use big words like recidivism, but what it really means is they've committed another crime and there have been more victims. And sometimes the second offense is more serious than the one that they got them into trouble in the first time. So it is to our benefit, it is to our public safety that we make these reforms work. And I thank those of you in the audience who have given us support in this undertaking, and there are many in this group who have done so. It would not have been possible without your encouragement. It would not have been possible without your support and encouragement of members of the General Assembly to vote for it and to vote for the appropriations that will allow us to spread accountability courts all the way across our state. That's a pretty good, quick overview of the system. I think it is something that we will all look back on with great pride. I believe it is one of those things that Georgia will soon be recognized as the #1 state in the nation for criminal justice reform that is meaningful, efficient, and keeps our state safe. Thank you for letting me be with you today. I apologize that I am going to have to scoot out and go to another meeting, but it's always great to be with you. Thank you.